All right, guys, it is a Wednesday. Another Wednesday. Can you believe it? We are at the end of September. Next time I talk with you, it's going to be October. It's crazy. Obviously, it's a big deal living in Wisconsin because fall is beautiful and amazing. But we also know winter's coming. And so we want to get the most out of living in the next couple weeks before it starts to really get cold. And we've been really fortunate. We've had an amazing, I should say, Indian summer. It's been in the 70s, maybe 60s, and then it drops down to the 40s and 50s at night. So it's perfect sleeping weather. So the topic that we're going to talk about today is multitasking. And you can find a lot of information out there about multitasking, right? So I tend to do multitasking along with everybody else. I think that just it's part of our life, right? In order to get things done, we feel like we need to do about 4 or 5 or 6 things all at one time. We don't have that focus. We need to have complete focus on our tasks. And so multitasking really doesn't work for a lot of things. It may work for some people in some instances, but most of the time it makes us less efficient and more prone to errors. Hopefully you are all joining in. I'd love to find out who's here. If you could just let me know in the comment that you're here, just go, hey, I'm here. Hi, whatever you'd like. Also, if you have any questions about the topic or you want to provide some feedback about multitasking, perhaps maybe what you do to multitask during the day or what you do to not multitask. So the topic really that I chose, and I talk to a lot of women every day about scheduling time for things on your calendar, like appointments, so you can block that time for yourself so you can be efficient and get those things done. Hey, Jody, nice to see you. And multitasking is one of those things that is not real efficient and can leave us more prone to errors, like I said. So, hey, Annie, nice to see you. Hey, I love it. So, like I said, I think multitasking may work for some things, but for the most part, I feel just in my own personal experience that it's very inefficient. Some days you may feel like you're this master multitasker, right? You're drinking your coffee, you're catching up on emails, you got a conference call that's playing, you got your earbuds in, and you're like honed in on all of those things at one time. And really, we're really wired not that way. We are really wired to be monotaskers, one thing at a time. And our brain really needs to focus on one thing at a time. And so when we think we're multitasking, right? We're doing the coffee, we're doing the emails, we're on a conference call, right? Because we need to show that we're at least there. You're just doing all those individual actions in like rapid succession. So you're not really paying attention to what you're doing. You're like task switching. So you're going from one task to the next task to the next task, on and on and on. It could be 3 or 4, I don't know how many tasks at one time. And you're really not focusing and finishing or getting one task completed, right? So there was a study that found that only 2.5% of people are able to multitask effectively. And for the rest of us, we attempt to multitask, but we're really not multitasking. And that means finishing projects, making, getting ahead with the tasks that you want to do. So Michelle's here. We have 2 Michelles here right now. And Pam, nice to see you as well, raising your hand. I love it that you guys are here. If you have any questions or, maybe you can tell me, do you find yourself multitasking? Do you think you're efficient? Do you think you're not efficient? Or, maybe how you feel about the topic. I think it does hinder performance. And there are studies that show when our brain is constantly switching gears, going from one thing to the next, to the next. Like I tend to do more multitasking doing housework. That obviously, I think you can do that. You're not hurting anything. You may not get as far, like cleaning blinds, for instance. I tried to do clean blinds, do some laundry, mop the kitchen floor and do all that this weekend, and I didn't even finish the blind cleaning because I wasn't focused on just that. So if those tasks, when you're multitasking, if each of those tasks are complex and require active attention, you're really not efficient and you're more likely to make mistakes. I don't know if that's happened to you, where you're replying to an email, but you're listening to, you're on like maybe a Zoom call, and then somebody asks you a question while you're on the Zoom call and you can't answer it because you weren't paying attention and you really needed to be focused on that. I bet that's happened to some of you. I know it's happened to me, and I can't be the only one. So, hey Cindy, and hey Catherine. Love having you guys here. And so your multitasking may not be as apparent to you or impactful to you as it might be to other people. But if your tasks are simple and routine, like let's say you're out walking and you're listening to music, or you're watching TV and you're folding laundry at the same time, that's a little bit like that as a multitasking, that's not going to impact anybody necessarily, right? But when the stakes are higher, you're in a business meeting, or you're supposed to be working on a project and it has a deadline, so those tasks that are more complex, when you're multitasking through that, it can negatively affect, right, the project, or not getting your the process done at that deadline. And it can impact your life. If you are driving in a car, and I see this happening unfortunately a lot, and I bet you guys do, when you're driving and somebody is texting, the person texting, eating, and driving all at once, that's very dangerous. That's dangerous to them, and it's dangerous to people around them. So when multitasking divides your attention, obviously it makes it harder for you to give full attention to that one thing, right? So for example, we just talked about poor, driving, and when you're doing all those things in a car, and you're supposed to be paying attention to the road, the stop signs, your speed, where you are in the lane, it can have a negative impact on a life. And so you really should not be doing that. Texting while you're driving or looking at Facebook can wait till you're at a stop sign, or not even then sometimes, because you might have somebody that thinks you're going and you're not, and they hit you in the back. Those kinds of things, that can wait till you get to your destination. So it's just important that you don't do that. So multitasking can also affect your ability to learn things, because you need to be able to focus on one thing. So the more we multitask, the less you actually accomplish, if that makes sense, because you slowly lose your ability to focus enough to learn, or to work through a problem, or to get to a end date with a deadline that you may have. Maybe you're in charge of a process improvement or something like that. And if you're constantly attempting to multitask, you're not practicing tuning out the rest of the world to engage in that deeper processing and or learning or completion of a project. One study also found that college students who tried to multitask, do all that, took longer to do their homework, and they actually had lower average grades. So our kids are kind of born multitaskers in a sense, right? Because all the social media, they have tablets, they have computers, they have TVs, they have tablets for school. They are just kind of born that way, and it's hard to kind of pull them back into and to teach them to focus on one thing versus 5 or 6 different things. So another pitfall is that trying to do too much at once makes it harder to be mindful and truly present in the moment. And when you need to be like that mindfulness that we've talked about in the past, to be mindful of you and your day and your goals and what you want to accomplish, it comes with a lot of benefits for your mind and your body. So being mindful and focusing on one thing at a time can help people who suffer from depression, anxiety, chronic pain, and lots of other conditions. So there's a lot to do with multitasking, and I agree, Michelle, with what you say. It depends on what you're doing, like I mentioned before, like folding laundry and watching TV. If you're like listening to Zoom while walking on the treadmill, very, very, that's easy to do. It's the emails, right? If you're trying to do all of that at once. paying attention is important because I always fear for the getting called out and saying, okay, Diana, what do you think about that? And I'd be like, I don't know what I think about that because I really wasn't paying attention, right? So, Jody says, yeah, all day long at work, right? You're all the constant multitasking. You play beat the next interruption and it's frantic. Yes, and so. And sometimes you have one of those days where it's difficult, right, to focus on that one thing. So I get it. And I think if we're just aware of it and and it can affect us negatively, it'll just help us understand why it's happening, right? So there are benefits to focusing on one task at a time. And for example, I'm going to take the example of a surgeon, okay? So they're an adult human being just like we are, and people assume that surgeons just need their primary skill is to have steady, precise hands because they're like doing a surgical procedure. But honestly, their true gift, just like anybody who needs to focus on one thing at a time, is the ability to focus on one person and complete a series of tasks over sometimes a lot of time. Like a big, like let's say open heart surgery, they can't be multitasking. They have to be focused on the procedure, the person, what comes next. It's kind of like they have to do these steps, right? Those people aren't just born with the ability to just focus. They have to develop and learn that, and that takes lots and lots of practice. And we can learn how to do that too. And excuse me, some things, I'm gonna grab some water. Some things that help me, and we've talked about spending time setting up your schedule where you have your workouts scheduled, you have your meetings at work scheduled, you have appointments, you have maybe older kids dropped off to college, or you have grandkids to pick up. That's all on your calendar, and you focus on those specific things at that time and not trying to multitask. So that's one way to help you stay focused and know that that's a way to cross that off your list, like boom, I did that. So that's something that I've done. And yeah, every day is not perfect, but more often than not, it's better than a day where you feel like you're multitasking and not getting very far, right? You're like, man, I was so busy, but what did I get done today? Have you ever had a day like that where you're like, did I really get anything done? Was I productive? So you kind of ask yourself that. So obviously you don't need to be a surgeon to benefit from freeing yourself of all the multitasking, but knowing that performing one thing at a time is very beneficial. And I want you to give it a try by blocking those times, making those appointments on your calendar, knowing that, yes, not every day is going to be perfect. Things happen, right? Life happens. The car doesn't start, you've got to go pick somebody up, you've got to run to the store for this or whatever it might be. So multitaskers lose focus more easily. We kind of talked a little bit about that. So we talked about the texting and driving and all of that kind of stuff. That's obviously very detrimental, or can be, not always, but you certainly don't want to be that person. You also don't want to do that in front of young kids in your car because they follow those behaviors. So you have to be careful with that. And we're trying to help our kids be less multitaskers and focus on one thing at a time. So multitasking actually slows you down, right? Because switching back and forth, those tasks take longer. Like for me, cleaning the blinds in my house, we have these wooden slatted blinds, which takes a little bit long time, and I'm still not done because I was multitasking, right? So I didn't get it done. Multitasking isn't always polite. So if you're in the privacy of your own office or at home, that's one thing, that kind of stuff. But if you're answering emails and you're texting and you're in a meeting where there's people sitting around, that's kind of rude, right? Especially if you're in a conversation and you do that and they ask you your opinion or that kind of thing, and you're not paying attention, that's just kind of disrespectful. So it's more important to focus at the project at hand. Even if you're in a meeting that's very boring. Sometimes our Zoom calls get kind of boring and you just want to multitask, right? Let's pass the time, but you might even be given an assignment and then not be able to do it or something like that. So multitasking does lead to mistakes. And so I can give you an example. So I'm working on a project and I'm at my computer, but I have my phone right here, and all of a sudden I get a notification. I pick it up and I take care of that notification, but then all of a sudden I end up searching and I'm surfing Facebook. Well, pretty soon I'm not doing my task. Pretty soon the time is 20 minutes later and I'm like, oh my gosh. So what I've done for myself is I take my phone when I'm working on something important and I put it on the charger across the room so I don't pick it up. I can get those notifications in 20 minutes or 30 minutes. That will wait for me. Multitasking is actually bad for your brain. Stanford University did a study and they found that chronic multitaskers focused on a single task, they usually were less efficient. So if you're chronically multitasking, that when you do try and slow down and do one thing at a time, you're less efficient because you've got to fix that brain, right? It changes the way your brain functions and it leads to decreased productivity even though you're focused because you're so used to doing that. You might even look up and kind of stare because you're used to picking up that phone. I find that with myself too. Just kind of be aware of that with yourself. You'll be able to tell. Multitasking interrupts the flow of work. So most people find that their most creative and productive work takes place when they are completely focused on one task at hand, right? Because of the productivity and the creativity. The creativity just declines. And also multitasking means absent-mindedness. So you kind of forget because you're multitasking. You got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different things going on in your head that you forget other things that might be important. You forget to go an example would be, not to throw my husband under the bus, but this has happened. He's focused on a project. He forgets that he has a child at hockey to pick up, or forgets that, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's 5:30 and I was supposed to be there at 5. So so that happens. Unfortunately, multitasking is one of those things that's ingrained in our culture and workplace. So what can we do to help us focus on one thing? And a couple examples would be follow your calendar the best you can on those days. I'll look at my calendar Sunday afternoon to look at what my week is, and I will adjust my calendar, look at my personal appointments and things like that. Like I said, every day is not perfect, but more often than not, it's better than if I didn't have those things on my calendar. So again, try and focus on a single task for at least 20 minutes before moving on to the next. So kind of set your clock, set a timer, and try that. That way, you're 20 minutes at a time, you'll be able to get a lot done. If you feel that you have to multitask to get further, I don't know, it might be just listening, maybe to a Zoom call and on the treadmill, but only do 2 things at once instead of 3 or 4 or 5. So limit the number of things that you are trying to multitask, because your brain works harder when you're trying to multitask, but then you're not going to be productive in either one, and then you're going to be doing the same thing tomorrow and then the next day and the next day. So So of course, our grandchildren are raised with smartphones, the internet, all that, and they are really, really susceptible to the negative effects of multitasking, the absent-mindedness, the lack of focus. I don't know if you find that. I have a couple stepsons. They're teenagers, and it's like they're on their phone and they come up and their brain is scrambled, and you're like, what happened? They're already going through puberty and growing, and they're going through some of that forgetfulness and kind of interesting stage, right? But then we give them all these tools to multitask with. So, and they're not focusing and they're making mistakes, they're not handing their homework in and those kinds of things. So, work with your kids. They can do one thing at a time too and be efficient and move on to the next. It's kind of like when you got your toys out or you're doing something, You complete the project, you put it away, it's done. It's like compulsion for completion, right? Get that done, move on to the next task, move on to the next task. So hopefully this was beneficial for you guys. It plays an important role when you are, we're talking about health and fitness and where we want to be in our next chapter and all of that. And really multitasking, trying to get your workout in, get to work on time or log into the computer on time, meal prep, all of that. And really what it comes down to is focus on one thing at a time. On your calendar, get that workout in. On your calendar is your meal prep for 60 minutes or 90 minutes or whatever it is, once or twice a week. Do it, get it done, move on to the next thing, right? So blocking off that time for yourself, not multitasking, trying to do 5 or 6 things at one time. It's going to help your brain. It's going to help you be productive. It's going to help you feel accomplished. Like, I did it. It's something I can check off. Drank my water today. I got my workout in. I got my meals all in. I feel successful. And again, do that. If you can plan that time, and I remember I always live by the 80-20. You're just rocking it, knocking it out 80% of the time, following your guidelines, your calendar, and that 20% of the time, you're living your life, right? Things happen. You want to enjoy your life, not live under a rock, but know that, okay, this was one of those days, right? Or I had that cheat meal, if that's what you call it or whatever, and then the next day you move on. And so that's where the multitasking, I believe, fit into like your schedule and where you are and where you want to be or where you want to be with your goals if you're not there already, and even maintaining those goals that you set for yourself. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about that multitasking and how it kind of feeds into this world that you're a part of here in Mind Body Beautiful. I do appreciate all of your comments. I'm going to quick look to see if anybody has any questions. I'm glad you all are here. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to post. This live will be posted in the guides section. So when you're in the group, up on below the picture, you'll see a word that says guides. This video will be put into the guide, and it's always it'll always be titled what we talked about. So you'll see multitasking labeled, and you can always refer to that. You can tag friends in these lives as well and look back on them for your benefit and for your education. So have a great rest of your Wednesday. Next time I talk with you guys will be October, so enjoy this upcoming weekend. Get out there, don't multitask. I'm just kidding. Get your schedule all set up, and you guys have an amazing rest of your night, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Take care.